Now maybe you've never noticed the grade stamps on a piece of plywood because you just haven't had to notice them. But in some circumstances, the inspector will sure notice it, and so perhaps you would be well advised to be able to read a plywood grade stamp to make darn sure that the material you're nailing down on a roof or on a deck is going to pass the inspection, because it is the material that is manufactured for the purpose that the inspector has to verify. There's a lot of information in this stamp, starting right here with Murphy Plywood. There are several Murphy Plywood manufacturing facilities up and down I-5 in my neighborhood. This is the American Plywood Association. It was started, I think, in the early 1930s, about the time that plywood began to show up in the building industry. This is a rated sheathing, and it's rated for 40 inches of span in a roof application and 20 inches of span in a floor application. Now this is a 5/8 panel, and I wouldn't be happy about a 40-inch span, but apparently in some cases these guys will stand behind that. This is the exposure. Exposure 1 means you can get it a little bit wet. You don't have to protect it carefully. It can wet, dry some number of times and maintain its integrity. Exposure 2 would mean that it can live in a high humidity environment with occasional leaks. I think an exposure panel would be a designation that means it doesn't care how long it's wet. And then there's an interior panel, which you better not let get wet at all. The thickness is 0.578 inches. That is not quite 5/8 of an inch. I don't know what 430 means. Maybe that's, I don't know what it means. CD is the grade of the faces, a C face and a D face. C being a little better, I think this is probably the C face. D having some voids. 19/32 category is the fractional equivalent of 0.578 inches. Look, you'll notice that that is 1/32 of an inch less than 5/8. That used to frustrate me, but I think I know now it's better for the sheeting not to accumulate into too great a dimension than to be, I think what it boils down to is you would rather have sheeting that is thin enough to go into the designated space, 5/8, than just a little too thick and it won't go. So anyway, this is something you might pay attention to, and there's a world of difference between the grade stamps on plywood and the grade stamps on OSB. So the grade stamp on an OSB sheet is the same thing, only with more ambiguity and contradictions, right? I mean, right off the bat we have Weyerhaeuser, made in Canada, but still graded by the American Plywood Association. Sheathing rating designations are similarly positioned, 32 inches on a lid or a roof, 16 inches on a floor or a deck. They get more ambiguous about exposure. See, we have meaningless numbers here. Maybe that's a mil number, I don't know. Can't read this. APA wades back in. 12 millimeters, who in the world knows what that means? I don't know, but on the outside of the unit, they'll put it in terms that anybody can deal with. It's 15/32, a little less than half an inch. But they get really, really vague and hard to nail down on the exposure ratings. They just say exterior type adhesive. So we'll take them at their word there. They give you the benefit of not being able to figure out which way is the strength axis, which means that the long direction spans across your joists or your rafters. Your joists or rafters go like this. This board is much stronger if you're trying to bend it like this than if you're trying to bend it like that. Now that's also usually pretty much true with plywood. So anyway, I don't know if it'll ever help you, but it'll certainly never hurt you to be able to interpret a plywood grade stamp while somebody's standing there who should know but doesn't know, and you can enlighten them maybe at a moment when it'll really redound to your reputation. Nothing wrong with that. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.